Hey, welcome to Mansplaining Van Halen. So what we're going to do today is we're going to read an article out of this Hit Parader magazine that's about Van Halen. And I've got Shelle Crow with me here today. And Shelle is an author and relationship counselor. Tell us about your books real quick.
Not counselor. I can't say that term. Just mentor. Coach.
She, a relationship mentor. Okay. But you have these amazing books.
I have a few books out there. Still the Pain, The Soulmate Frequency, and Communicating with Men. They're all about different stages of relationships, so check them out.
Yes, indeed. Actually, I have one of them right here on the shelf. If you watch the stuff that we put on the shelves, this is one of them right here. I've actually read it to that point right there. So it's actually pretty good. Communicating with Men. All right, let's put that back. Okay, Shelle, thanks for being here. What we're going to do, we've got a Hit Parader magazine. We've got an article in here about Van Halen. This is a Hit Parader yearbook. It's from, by the way, it's $2.95. Isn't that crazy thinking about that?
It is, because I picked up a magazine the other day and it was literally $22 for it. For a little magazine.
Yeah,
I'm like,
amazing.
what the?
It's amazing how things have changed.
And
like
that is from 1984 and you still have this. I was in diapers at the time.
Nice. Okay. I was past diapers, but I was still very young. Fall 1984, I was 15 years old here. So this was a big time for music. It's in fall of 1984, especially because of who's on the cover and who we're going to talk about today, this is David Lee Roth, who's the singer for Van Halen. Of course, Van Halen had put out the album 1984.
That's right.
And everybody's heard songs off of that album. Jump is the one that everybody in the world has heard before. And then the song Panama, Hot for Teacher, all that stuff came off of this album. And then you can see all the other people that were popular at the time. Of course, there's Ozzy. There's Joe Elliott from Def Leppard. There's Joan Jett. There's Motley Crue. You can see everybody listed along the side. Motley Crue, Van Halen, Def Leppard, Ozzy Osbourne, Quiet Riot. Billy Squier was a big deal. Iron Maiden was a big deal. I mean, look at these. Judas Priest. Michael Schenker. You've probably never heard of Michael Schenker,
no.
I'm guessing. AC/DC. Everybody's heard of AC/DC. Yep. They've been just big forever. Joan Jett. There's Black Sabbath. Black Sabbath was in a very, very strange place at this point. John Cougar. Kiss, also in kind of an odd position. Scorpions, Night Rangers, Styx, Ted Nugent. Hagar Sean. You know Neil Sean. He was from Journey. And Sammy Hagar actually sang for Van Halen.
Well, I only knew the Sammy Hagars, but yeah.
Yeah, and actually Sammy Hagar ended up singing for Van Halen after this all ended. So, and then, anyway, except a bunch of other things, like Saxon. Queensryche, we've talked about a bunch on the channel. Anyway, that's what's going on in the world of music at this point. So we're going to bust this open to talk about this cool Van Halen article that Shelle's going to read through, and I'm going to mansplain. What happened was we did one of these before, and we actually got a lot of views. We got thousands of people that watched one of these where you read the thing, and I was just commenting. But a bunch of people said, I hate watching this guy mansplain, and I thought, you know what? I'm leaning into that. That's funny as heck. So anyway, that's what we're doing here today. We're gonna read this article, which you're too young to know anything about because you were in diapers, as you've mentioned. And then I'm going to just provide...
You're going to mansplain for me.
I'm going to provide... It's mansplaining commentary. Contextual commentary is what I'm going to provide to this little discussion. So the article is called... What is it? Too
Hot to Handle. America's premier band revel in their chart-topping success.
And you can see here that we've got a picture of Alex Van Halen right there. And yeah. Okay. Here we go.
He's holding a bunch of beer, I think.
Looks like it.
Okay. By Ron Hunt. David Lee Roth is a walking, talking bundle of nervous energy. While his laconic speech patterns and Kama Sutra philosophies often belie that fact, once stripped of his pretense, Roth's true personality begins to shine through. I was hyperactive as a child. I guess I'm still a bit hyperactive, Van Halen's blonde-haired, green-eyed vocalist admitted in his distinctive rapsy voice. My mother used to worry about me because I could never sit still, even at the dinner table. I used to play with the silverware, and it'd get so bad that my family used to call dinner monkey hour. My mom called up a doctor who told her I was hyperactive. What a surprise. I could have told her that and saved her the money.
I actually really love hearing stuff like that, like it's Monkey Hour with David Lee Roth at dinner. And it's funny when you listen to that, because if you ever watched interviews with him he just seems like it. He's just like, he can't stop moving. And he's always got that big smile on his face. And anyway, he's kind of a spaz. But it made him really, really entertaining in concert.
Yeah, I was going to say, was it just like in interviews, or did you see it on concert?
Yeah,
or was there enough energy that he kind of didn't have that?
He really did in concert have this kind of master of ceremonies thing about him. But not just that. When he was in concert, I mean, he would do like these big jumps and kicks and pirouettes and flip. I mean, it was wild. He was just this wild, crazy, super fun, energetic frontman. So one of the great frontmen in rock and roll history.
Huh.
Anyway, so just interesting hearing that really has been part of his personality since he was a child.
Since those early days in Bloomington, Indiana, Roth has managed to turn his monkey hour activities into his life calling, fronting the most energetic band in rock. With the group's current release, 1984, proving to be the most successful slab of vinyl in VH's 7-year history, it seems that Roth, along with his bandmates Michael, Anthony, Edward, and Alex Van Halen, have managed to turn their unique backgrounds and their unquestioned rock and roll skills into pure platinum pay dirt.
Yeah, and by the way, it's interesting when he says that this 1984 was for sure their biggest album. Which is kind of a funny thing, because they broke up right after this. And that was what was fascinating for so many of us at the time, because this is the first time I ever saw Van Halen in concert, was on this tour. And they're on top. They were the biggest. They were so huge, and that album was so big, and the music videos were everywhere. The songs were incredible. You'd hear them and see them, and it was just. And then they just collapsed.
Where did you see them at the time?
I was living in Denver.
Okay.
There's a place called McNichols Arena, and they were fun. Anyway, it was a fun concert. The music is great. They were just a great band, and it just shocked everybody that they were right on top, and then they kind of just let it go. So anyway, and there's different ways of looking at that, because I remember reading an article with Sting from the Police, and I think they were playing at Madison Square Garden. This was on the Synchronicity tour. And he said something like they had sold out 2 nights at Madison Square Garden. And he said something like he was standing on stage, looking out the audience, thinking, we have nowhere to go but down at this point. And so they broke up. And so it's almost like when you reach this certain pinnacle, go out as legends, rather than, fading away over time. And so I don't know. There's different ways of looking at it. I don't want to get off on that, but it's just interesting that it shocked so many of us that there they were, as big as they'd ever been, and then when you go back and you read some of the books, like Alex Van Halen's book, and you start realizing there were some rifts that were coming into the band. Ted Templeman talks about it in his book. And you can see why the thing started falling apart the way it did. And so, anyway, there's a whole bunch of stories behind it.
But not from the outside. Like, nobody knew at the time it was happening.
You could see some of it, because there was a couple of weird things happened. So you're familiar with the song Beat It.
Yeah.
Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
The guitar solo in Beat It is played by Eddie Van Halen. And what had happened is Van Halen had kind of this unwritten rule that they don't do anything outside the band. It's just the band. And so he got contacted about doing a guitar solo for this Michael Jackson song. Michael Jackson was not Michael Jackson at that point.
I was going to say, you wouldn't say no to that.
But he was popular, but he wasn't. It was Beat It in that album, Thriller, that made him the juggernaut that he became. I mean, everybody knew who Michael Jackson was, but Thriller was when he became the thing.
Yeah.
And so Eddie Van Halen, they contacted him about doing this guitar solo, and he decided, whatever. He didn't even take any money. He just did it as kind of a favor.
Oh, wow.
And so he did this guitar solo. The rest of the band didn't know much about it. And then all of a sudden, now there's this song that comes out, biggest song in the world, Beat It. And then there's Eddie Van Halen, who's kind of gone out of the band and done this other thing. Well, then at the same, so then right around the same time, then David Lee Roth goes off with Ted Templeman, who's Van Halen's producer, and he puts out a little EP called Crazy from the Heat, where he does California Girls, Beach Boys song. And so he starts doing his own little solo thing, and then it kind of gets unsettled at that moment. And then when you start reading about the recording of 1984, Eddie Van Halen had built this new recording studio outside of his house. And then all of the stuff that happened with that, the rifts that started with Ted Templeman, who was their producer. And it just, looking back now, you can see, okay, there were things that were happening that were about to lead to this.
Interesting.
This
so
dissolution.
The music didn't go bad. It was the relationship.
And isn't that the way a lot of this stuff is? The relationships start falling apart, and then of course, you throw all the drugs in the middle of it.
Well, because sometimes you talk about how, they put out this album, nobody really loved it. It wasn't their best work, and you could kind of see how somebody might fizzle out. But what you're saying is like, no, they were on top, and it imploded.
Yeah. Yep.
Interesting. Okay. I moved around a lot when I was a child, Roth said. I was born in Indiana, but we moved to Massachusetts, then Illinois, and finally Los Angeles. I never was much of a conformist. Surprise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
I used to love to take my guitar to school and sit under a tree and play. I'd always forget what time it was, and I'd always miss class. But I found out very quickly that you can meet a lot more girls sitting under a tree with a guitar than you can in chemistry class.
Yeah, and it's funny because we have a lot of musicians that watch this channel, and let's be honest. How many of you started playing guitar or started playing an instrument for this? It's really funny, but it is one of the motivating factors behind starting to play music is that
no
it makes
way.
it easier to talk to girls.
Did you start playing because of a girl or wanting to get girls?
Well, did I start playing because of that? Maybe.
What?
It was probably not initially for sure, but it was definitely a motivating factor. I have stories about that.
You can even see the dreamy look in your eye right now. Like, I remember what she looked like.
No, it's a strange thing that girls will pay more attention to you. And as a matter of fact, I have a lot of interesting stories that happened to me when I became a professional musician, and you will literally get. You walk into a nightclub as a normal guy, no women are gonna pay attention to you at all. You walk into a nightclub and you're the center of attention on a stage, even if it's not a big place, and weirdly, women start picking up on you. It just is, and it's not that you're special. You're the same guy that would have just come in and no one would have paid attention to you. But it does. I don't know what to tell you. It is one of those things. So anyway, I'm just curious, how many of you know what I'm talking about? Okay, anyway.
The early life of guitar whiz Eddie Van Halen was similar to Roth's. Born in Holland, his family immigrated to Los Angeles when Edward and Alex were small children. His father was a classically trained musician, and in his preteen years, Eddie was forced to take piano lessons that, as he recalled, seemed to go on for hours. In fact, he hated the rigid regimentation of his teaching so much that he rebelled when given the opportunity.
Now, this is kind of an interesting thing because for a lot of us, we weren't really aware of this fact that he actually was a trained piano player. And so when they started introducing the keyboards, especially on the album 1984, that threw a lot of us because Eddie Van Halen's like the greatest guitar player on the planet.
Oh, yeah.
Why is he playing keyboards? And to him, it made perfect sense because he'd grown up playing keyboards. To us as an audience, young guys that didn't really know all this backstory, we're like, dude, why are we doing this now? And for him, it's just, well, that's what I do. And you don't really realize, you'd catch some of these things in these magazines, but a lot of us didn't. So it just seemed weird. So anyway.
I've always been kind of loose when it comes to music. I like what sounds good, he said. I really never cared about how something was supposed to be done, as long as what came out sounded neat. My teachers always used to get on me for playing something a little bit different. I always hated that. I used to ask them, But how did it sound? They just give me a dirty look and tell me that I had no future as a musician.
That's so awesome. Yeah, I love
That's
it.
a good point. It's a good bet that many Edward's former music teachers now brag that I taught him everything he knows, despite his protestations that I learned more about playing guitar by practicing in my room alone than because of any teacher. His incredible 6-string stylings have always been the most readily recognizable element of any Van Halen's recording. While he had taken up keyboards in 1984, the guitar remains his greatest passion.
Yeah, and actually one of the things that isn't widely talked about is that he actually did play keys on the album Women and Children First. It was kind of a Wurlitzer piano. And when I was a kid and I heard it, I thought it was a guitar, but then when you listen to it a little closer, you're like, oh, he's playing a keyboard there. So anyway, 1984 was not the first time that they introduced keyboards in Van Halen, but...
So what isn't he the one who created that guitar playing where he used both the fingers?
Yeah, if you ask him, he'll tell you that he didn't create it, but he is the one that kind of made that normal. Okay. Hey, we want to hear from you. And what I mean by that is we really, really want to hear from you. Down in the first comment below and in the show notes, there is a link where you can literally go sign up for 15 minutes to actually give me a call. And what I want to hear from you is, number one, I want to hear the 3 videos that we have made that you liked the most. Number 2, I want to hear the topics that you want us to do or that you enjoy the most. We'll have a quick meeting, go through those, and then anything else you want to chat about. We got 15 minutes. There's a link down below. So sign up for one of those slots, and we're looking forward to talking to you.
Okay, what was that called again?
Popular.
It has a name, right?
Finger tapping.
Oh, tapping. That's right. That was called tapping.
I saw him in an interview once where he was talking about it, and he was talking about how he saw, I think it was Jimmy Page in one of the concerts where he'd just sit there and he'd just do this with his fingers.
Yeah.
Without, not doing anything with his hand. Uh-huh. But you can push down and pull off on the notes and have them going without using your right hand at all. And so then Eddie Van Halen's thinking, well, wait, just add
I wonder if any of
there.
that came from him being a piano player, because you're normally using both hands.
Yeah, who knows?
And then I've watched him tap before, and he's got both hands on this guitar. It's amazing to watch.
Yeah, and then it just then everybody started picking up on it. So he does get a lot of credit for kind of popularizing that approach to the guitar. And then you had people years later that just took it to extremes, like Stanley Clarke, I think was his name, that just got to the point that, he never picked anything. I don't think it was just always these elaborate, crazy things that he would do. And so anyway, it did, but again, he really did popularize it.
Interesting. Nothing can replace the guitar in my life, he said, but I also love keyboards. The piano was the first instrument I played, and I've had a strong affection for it all my life. I've always written a lot of our material on keyboards. It's just that in the past I'd interpreted into a guitar. On this album, I didn't do that. I left the keyboard parts as they were. Too much has been made of the fact that I'm playing keyboards on this album and tour. It doesn't mean I'm phasing the guitar out. This only explains our sound. It surely doesn't change it totally.
So it expands
our sound.
Now, it's interesting. It's not just interesting what he said. It's interesting that he said this, because this emphasizes what I was saying a little while ago. Yeah. That so many people were going, what in the world is going on here? And obviously the fact that he felt like he needed to make this comment drives home what I was saying.
Yeah.
That there were a lot of us going, what are we doing here? This makes no sense and I don't like it. And yet it is what put them on a whole nother, like he said, expands their sound. It introduced them to a whole new audience, launched them into the stratosphere. So much so that even today, I think most people have probably heard the song Jump.
Oh, yeah. It seems like such a common, like everybody grew up with that at some point.
Yeah.
Just in their life.
Yeah.
One of the reasons for the more expansive sound utilized by Van Halen in 1984 is the fact that the band was able to use Edward's home studio for the first time during the album's production. It's a great place, Roth stated. Having a studio that we can use at any time gives us a lot more excuses for doing nothing.
Yeah.
We don't have to worry about someone saying, hey, the place is only rented for the next 10 minutes. We know we can use it anytime we want. Of course, for Van Halen, the temptation to work all the time isn't very attractive. In fact, just getting the four of us into one place at the same time is a miracle. Usually a couple of us will show up and we'll sit around downing a few beers waiting for everyone else. After a couple of hours and a couple more beers, we'll say, well, that's another tough day at the office. See you tomorrow.
This is okay. Now David Lee Roth is saying this kind of tongue in cheek, but when you learn about this, what was going on, he's kind of exposing a little bit of what happened with this studio.
Sarcastically. He's like, well, let me let you in on it.
Because here's the thing, and it's become infamous now, or infamous. That's the right word to use partly for this. It's a very well-known thing that he built this studio that he called 5150.
Okay.
And basically Eddie Van Halen built it in his backyard for all intents and purposes. While they were recording 1984, it was still a construction zone. I mean, they were still putting things up.
They were recording the album there
and they were recording it. Yeah, so it still wasn't finished. And you hear all the stories, and it was crazy. And there was a lot of this, where there was, there's a lot of drug abuse, substance abuse, sitting around, working late at night, not working during the day. Ted Templeman, who's the producer, kind of, when he shows up, nobody's ready, and he can't. And it's such an interesting thing, because I talked about this in another video just not long ago. I was talking about the benefits in a creative space of having limitations, and he's kind of pointing this out here, because if you have a recording studio at your disposal, and you don't have, we have to be done by Thursday, then really it's actually
I think
dangerous.
That's with anything, not just a recording studio.
But,
working from home, sometimes that's harder.
That's
than
having
to
the
check
point.
in and then being able to leave it be, right? It kind of weaves through your whole day and night, and you never shut it off, and therefore you think you're doing something about it.
Maybe never turn it on.
But you're probably not, because you're still you're just there all the time.
Yeah, and see, Ted Templeman, who was their producer, if you've never listened to or read Ted Templeman's book, you need to. It's really, really good. And he gives you all the stories about the Van Halen stuff, especially this period of time. Ted Templeman was an executive with the record company that they were with, and he was also a producer. And so he was this really good businessman, and he was also this creative energy. But what that meant is that he understood budgets and schedules and time constraints, while also being a very creative person at the same time. So when they'd worked on all their albums prior to this, they'd set up the time, they'd have the budget, they'd have everything, and it's we got to go in, we got to get this done by this time, this done by this time, very regimented, and then that's how they would work. And then all of a sudden, Eddie Van Halen goes, hey, I'm building a studio in my backyard. And then now Ted Templeman is having to deal with this whole new thing where they've got this dynamic just changed dramatically at that point. And then they end up having, missing deadlines, and who's got the tapes, and where is this, and who's making backups, and I can't get into the studio, and who's working on what, and I didn't approve this. I mean, it was just crazy stuff. And one of the things, and I don't want to get off on this too much, but you're an author.
Yeah.
You have 4 books for all intents and purposes. Tell me about the discipline required to get those done.
Well,
I've never asked you this. I'm putting you on the spot. But tell me about the discipline.
Because I'm a self-author, I had to come up with my own deadlines. It was I want to get it done by, I had to give myself deadlines in order to get stuff done.
Okay.
But I don't think that that's really normal. A lot of people are waiting. My daughter goes through this when she wants to have creative inspiration so she can do some art, unless she's really I'm going to discipline myself to sit down and spend this amount of time, even if I don't get anything done that I like, this is the 3 hours I'm dedicating to at least the project. Yeah.
So what my point is with all this is, how many people besides you have you known that have said, yeah, I really want to write a book?
Oh,
thousands, right? Everybody
says that. Oh, I'd love
I'd love to write a book. How many of them ever write a book?
Oh, yeah.
Why? This very thing. because when's your due date? The day you die. I mean, there is no due date. And when you don't put those that's the point here.
Yeah.
That they built this studio. Now we have no limitations.
So do you think that was like the start of their downfall?
I think that is a downfall for a lot of people when the bands get so much money and they get into a position where they can afford as much studio time as they want, or they build their own studio. I mean, look back at some of the greatest albums ever recorded, like Black Sabbath's first album. You know how many days it took to record Black Sabbath's first album? 1. And it's considered one of the greatest heavy metal albums ever made. And it took a day to do it. Like the whole album. And that's the part that people, and you assume, this is where everybody gets so mixed up. You assume that if you have more time, it allows you to be more creative and do more expressive stuff. But the reality of it is, when you have too much time, you never get it done because there's no deadline. I actually talked about this. Like I wrote this book, and I had to, same thing. There's me on the back. I had to give myself a deadline. I have to have this thing done by X date, and it's going to get published, and that's it. But if I didn't do it, just like you, that's why I asked you that question. Because, by the way, your next 11 marketing moves, if you have a business or you're any sort of marketing stuff, this is an awesome book. It tells the story of Audio Mover, where it came from, how it all
No way.
built. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, it's kind of cool.
I'm picking
the
that
business
up next.
behind the podcast. But the point is, and David Lee Roth is being kind of sarcastic as he talks about it here, but we have this weird idea that if we have plenty of time to work on something, it'll allow us to have more freedom and more. And the reality of it is, the freedom comes in the constraints. You have to have the constraints on yourself, or with no constraints, the freedom runs amok, and you never write your book. I'm pointing at the finger because I've known hundreds. When I put out 2 different books now, and every time I show it to people, they go, "Man, I really wish I could." I'm like, it's not that hard. It's really not hard. All you have to do is set a date, work backwards, and get everything done on time, and then that's it. But you can't do it if you don't have constraints. Sorry, I didn't mean to get off on this.
No, you did.
But I'm bringing it up because in the history of Van Halen, this is a pivotal thing that happened with them, and it's something that we actually everybody can learn from.
Yeah.
This idea that the creativity, and it's not just writing a book. I'm bringing that up because you wrote a book. I wrote, and we understand that. But doing a record like this, any sort of creative endeavor, the strength, the freedom weirdly comes in the constraints. You know, for those of us that love this classic media, I think most of us remember these things, audio and videotapes. And I recently realized that a lot of the viewers of this channel don't realize that behind this channel, there's a company called the Audio Mover Digitizing Studio. And for 25 years, we've been digitizing old media like this for individuals and organizations across the United States and Canada. So if you have any old audio or videotapes you need preserved, we can help. And for anybody watching this video today, we're offering a 15% discount on any Audio Mover digitizing service. Just use the discount code on the screen. So visit audiomover.com today to learn more and get an order started.
Interesting. Okay, we'll keep reading about what he says about his home studio. Edward is slightly more serious when discussing his new home recording facility. "I'm not boasting, but the studio I built is a very special place. I've been in a lot of studios in my life, but this one sounds better than any place else I've ever been in. There's a quality you can get here that I haven't found anywhere else. I don't know what it is, because we surely haven't put the best equipment in the world in, but there's an atmosphere that lets you get some amazing results. The results, as shown in 1984, have helped reestablish Van Halen as one of the world's premier hard rock bands."
Now, it's interesting to have them say reestablish. And, because they're about to talk about why here. Prior to the album 1984, they had an album that was, in the history of Van Halen, is one of these that it's controversial.
Why?
Well, I can't remember if they talk about it. Keep going, and I'll mansplain this in a minute.
I love it. Keep doing it.
If it needs to be. Okay, keep going.
Following the release of the group's last album, Diver Down, there was considerable speculation concerning VH's continued viability. It seemed to many that the band had run its course, that their creative ideas had come to an end. The success of 1984, however, shows that the reports of Van Halen's demise were, to say the least, premature.
So they put out this album called Diver Down. I think it barely clocked in at 30 minutes long. It was there wasn't much on it, and most of it was cover tunes.
Oh yeah, that's okay. I remember talking about that.
And so a lot of people were going, what is this? You know, like, and it's not like they hadn't done cover tunes before. I mean, one of their first hits was "You Really Got Me" by the Kinks. You know, that was on their first album. So they'd done cover tunes before, but this one was like a bunch of them. They had an old Kinks song on. They had another Kinks song, "Where Have All the Good Times Gone." They did "Dancing in the Streets." They did "Big Bad Bill" as Sweet William.
This sounds like a fun album.
It was super fun. I think it was the first Van Halen album I got. I got it on a cassette tape. And I loved it. I loved it. Matter of fact, they did the song "Pretty Woman."
No way.
By Roy Orbison. Yeah. So I mean, it was just all cover tunes. It sounds just like
something you'd love to just listen to.
It was such a fun record. But when I got it as a kid, I didn't realize how many of these songs were actually covers.
Yeah.
But then, so when they put it out, though, it was this album that didn't have very many songs on it. Most of it was cover tunes, and a lot of people are going, okay, these guys might be at the end of their line, you know, and so then that's why this, you know, when 1984 came out, everybody goes, okay, you're right. They haven't. Matter of fact, they're better than they've ever been for a lot of people. But that Diver Down, it threw a lot of people for a little bit. I loved it. For a lot of people that summer, that was the party album because it was very fun stuff. But anyway.
The failure of the last album really wasn't our fault, a defensive Roth stated. If you want to find out why the album didn't do so well as it should, go ask our record company. There were a lot of people there at the time who were far more concerned with getting their daily allotment of cocaine than with promoting our album. They say that those people are all gone now, and I believe them, but don't lay all the blame for that album on us.
Okay, and it's funny, David Lee Roth is just brutally honest. and when you read the stories about some of this stuff, that's exactly true.
I didn't know he was just...
I mean, when you read the stuff about even recording 1984, the amount of cocaine that was being used just there during that, I mean, this stuff was just all part of that world, you know? And so anyway, so they had the record company that was, anyway, I don't want to get off on this too much, but he looks back at that and he goes, look, yes, maybe it wasn't the big, but there was a lot of moving parts here that wasn't just us that caused that to turn out the way it did.
I really like a lot of stuff on Diver Down, he added. It was a fun album to do, and it's a great party album. You put that on when you have some friends over and nobody's going to start crying, that's for sure. We got a lot of criticism because of all the cover tunes on that album, and some people think that why we didn't put any... because we didn't put any of that on it in 1984. Let me set the record straight. That's totally incorrect. If we found a song that we thought fit in the rest of the album, we would have covered it in a second. The only one we considered was In the Midnight Hour, but that struck us as too much of a stab at pure commerciality. While Roth's statement could lead one to believe that commercial success isn't high on the band's list of priorities, a spokesperson at the band's label, Warner Brothers Records, expressed great pleasure over the chart-topping status of 1984. We've always believed in Van Halen, and that belief has been rewarded many times over on this album. Yet one must ask about Roth's charges of company neglect leading to the demise of Diver Down. That's just David having fun, the Warner's representative said. He enjoys shocking people from time to time.
Listening to this stuff, I mean, I don't know, again, you go back and hear the stories of what was going on at the time, and you know these are a lot of people at the time trying to cover their
their asses,
whatever, and but whenever David Lee Roth would say something, you're like, there's something in there because he doesn't hold back. Whatever he's saying there's a little bit of truth in there. You can be sure about it. So anyway, but again, like I said a little while ago, Ted Templeman, who was the producer of all their records, was one of the vice presidents there at Warner Brothers Records. And so, and he was involved with Diver Down. And so anyway, they were a big part of Warner Brothers' success. Van Halen was, and especially in 1984 when that comes out, that just superstars at that point.
Huh. Okay, no matter how Roth's accusatory statements are to be viewed, it seems that the success of 1984 has soothed the ruffled feathers of all parties, with Van Halen's current world tour expecting to gross an estimated $15 million from sales of tickets, t-shirts, and other band-related items. There seems to be little room in Van Halen's world for petty differences and name-calling. Roth, however, insists that the lure of fortune does little to inspire him each day.
Now, again, this is such an important thing. This is why I love reading these things. Because now, here we are 70, 80 years later. I don't know what it is. It's been a long time since this was written.
70 or 80.
Here we are all these years later, and we're listening to what they were saying right there. And just hear that again, where he's saying, all the ruffled feathers are gone. Everything's fine. Everything's wonderful. And the reality of it is, it's all about to implode.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why I love this, because now we know. Now we know. And so when we listen to this, like, hey, success, everybody's great. We're having a great time. Ruffled feathers are gone. And it's like, nope. What's really going on right now, what's really going on that you don't know is happening, and then there's all this other stuff. Some of it I talked about earlier, but you realize, no, this is about to go really, really bad.
Yeah, but we hear this statement a lot from these guys. We've read a few of these magazines, and they always go into this area of like, no, you know what? I cared about the music. Like, I cared about the music. I think it's interesting to have, they always bring that up. And you can see it because what they created, Anyway.
But in the end, though, when you start having this amount of success, the money does become a thing, and more than the money, the egos take over. And when you have, and what made this band, and I want to get your feedback on this, because I know that you guys know what I'm talking about here. When you have this massive personality, like David Lee Roth, who may be one of the greatest frontmen in all of rock and roll history, and standing right next to him, 5 feet away, is Eddie Van Halen, who may be the greatest guitarist in rock history, probably the most influential. You throw them in the same band, and you make them worldwide monster superstars, and then you mix in with that what we said earlier.
Some cocaine.
Well, you throw the drugs, you throw the money, and then you throw right around the same time, within a couple of years, but I mean, it's all happening, it's all in the world and it's all happening at the same time. Beat It from Michael Jackson becomes the biggest song on the biggest album ever recorded, and so Eddie Van Halen's on it.
Did it become like big then?
Oh, yeah.
Then it was.
Oh my gosh.
Okay,
yes,
okay.
It was huge. Michael Jackson became the biggest, I mean,
he was
filling stadiums.
Time frame. Okay.
He was huge.
Okay.
And that album became the biggest. So then right in the middle of it, Eddie Van Halen goes and plays a guitar solo on what would become the most recognized song in the entire planet and the most recognized guitar solo in history. And right around the same time, David Lee Roth by himself goes out and puts out another album that sells incredibly well without the band. And you got these two massive egos that are having success doing whatever they touch. And then you've got the control. Who's the focal point here? Then, Eddie builds the studio, so he has more control over stuff. David's I mean, it just gets especially the egos. When you have these two guys who are two of the most important people in popular culture in the same room, in the same band, and they're massively famous, you're going to have problems. Just the way it is. And that's where, as they try to tamp it down and make it look like, no, this is whatever. You go, no. This is when things start going really, really bad.
Okay, he continues. I wouldn't live my life any different if I had $10 or 10 million, he said. Money doesn't control me. Nothing does. I do what I want, when I want, which to me is what rock and roll is all about. I didn't get into rock and roll because of the money. I saw it as a great way to meet women and a great way to act a little crazy. When we're on tour, it's total insanity. We're like the world's biggest gang. We have technicians and roadies and engineers. It's great. We just pack everyone and everything up and move from town to town. We're like the world's greatest traveling circus. And I get to play ringmaster every night.
Yeah, and that's I think I was saying something about that earlier, like he's the master of ceremonies.
You did say that,
And if you ever saw him in concert, I mean, he did have this massive ego because he was a good-looking guy. He was in great shape, and he was this fun entertainer and yeah, anyway. Okay.
Roth's enthusiasm for the road isn't always shared by the rest of Van Halen entourage. With the band's 3 other members all married, road life presents new problems and difficulties. Reports last year indicate that the band's hectic schedule had strained the marriage between Edward and actress Valerie Bertinelli. But with Miss Van Halen appearing at many of the band's 1984 tour stops, any problems seemed to have been resolved.
So do you know who Valerie Bertinelli is?
No.
So back in the 80s, she was just the darling of Hollywood.
Okay.
Like everybody had a crush on her. She was this cute girl, and for some reason when Eddie and her met, they just were inseparable. They just were crazy about each other instantly.
Aww.
Yeah, and they had a son named Wolfgang, and Wolfgang is this hyper talented musician, songwriter, plays multi-instrumentalist. I'm a fan.
Yeah.
Like he is so good that I think he would be famous if he wasn't Eddie Van Halen's son. There's not a lot of people you can say that become famous sons of people. Wolfgang Van Halen, I think, is one of them. But anyway, so Valerie Bertinelli, she was in this show called One Day at a Time, and then Eddie Van Halen, somehow the two of them met, and they just hit it off, and they didn't stay together. But they, even when Eddie Van Halen died, Valerie was kind of like, you could tell she still just loved him, and I don't know all the backstory, the personal stuff that happened with them, but they apparently just had this kind of like soul connection from way back when. And so anyway, that's what they mentioned, that because when he built 5150, that studio, they were married, and she would sometimes go to Ted Templeman and say, can you tell him to
get
come
to work
in the house? Yeah, like come into the house every once in a while and be with the family. It was that kind of thing where he is, because then of course he's in on the road, and I've never had to go through something like that, but that can't be healthy on.
Oh yeah, that wouldn't be easy.
As Steve Perry says, being apart ain't easy on this love affair. Two strangers learn. What is that from? Is that from Faithfully? Yeah, that's Faithfully. Jonathan Cain wrote that song. Journey song, anyway. Okay.
There's no question that touring is a bit more difficult. Oh, I think I read that one, didn't I?
No.
Okay. Difficult now than it was when we first started out, Edward explained. You just can't throw your amp in the back of the car and take off anymore. But we've been doing this for a long time now, so we're used to the lifestyle, and we still get a kick out of it. We may not be as wild as we were a few years ago, except for David, but we still manage to have fun. I can't see playing rock and roll being anything but fun. If that day ever comes, I guess then we'll all stop. Van Halen will keep going on forever, Roth quickly added. Why would we want to stop?
Okay, now that
just right before they stopped.
This is why I love reading this stuff.
Why would we want to stop? They're paying us to get on stage and party with 20,000 people every night. As long as we are all willing to do that, who am I to say no?
Yeah, exactly. And this is again why this stuff is so interesting, because now we know what was about to happen with all this stuff. Why would we want to stop? There was another article we read, because I'll tell you, we all kind of saw the solo thing that David Lee Roth did. We all knew about Eddie Van Halen's solo, and there was these rumors about what's going to happen with the band. And David Lee Roth, even in interviews with these guys, they'd be like, nothing to worry about. Everything's cool. Everything's wonderful, right before it came apart. And it's just, anyway, it's an interesting study on so many different things we've talked about here that have to do with egos, that have to do with success, that have to, all these different things come into play. But 1984 really was the pinnacle of their success. Now, not every Van Halen fan thinks that's their greatest album. But if you read Alex Van Halen's book, Brothers, he thinks that's when they hit, that was like the greatest thing.
That was their peak. Yeah.
And interestingly, in Alex Van Halen's book, he ends his book then. There's a whole nother chapter of Van Halen that happens for many years after that, and Alex Van Halen doesn't touch it. And that's the stuff with Sammy Hagar.
Huh.
Because for a lot of people, that's when the band turned into something different. And it wasn't the Van Halen that we all knew. And I was that way too. I mean, I was excited when Sammy Hagar joined the band because I was a big Sammy Hagar fan, but I don't know, it just didn't have the same thing. But like I said earlier, though, you have to balance these things and go, would they have been able to sustain that? Yeah. Or was it maybe, from a historical standpoint, one of those things where you go, maybe it's okay that you go out on top and then go into chapter 2 with another person.
Yeah, interesting.
Just something to think about. And who knows? That is why we sit here and do this channel, so we can talk about utterly unimportant things and philosophize about stuff that really doesn't matter, yet it is still so much fun. And it's the stuff that colored so many of our lives when we were young. Because I tell you, and I know a lot of people watching this right now can relate to this, we would sit around and just talk about this stuff. What do you think is going to happen, man? Oh, yeah, I heard this. It was great. It was great fun. And that was what we did back when we were younger. So, hey, Shelle, thanks for doing that. That was fun.
Thanks for inviting me.
It's always a blast having you here. You bring great energy to this stuff. It's very fun to do. And hey, if you're not following the channel, follow the channel, like the video. I would love to hear all your comments about this because I know so many of you lived through the same stuff. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You had these exact same experiences. And so I'd love to get your feedback on all these things as well. And so like the video, leave comments, and share this with all your friends. And with that, have yourself a fantastic day.
Bye.